At the beginning of last week, I'd made my usual afternoon journey to pick up my daughter from the school bus stop, and we'd travelled the 9 miles to get back home. We live in the first house in a cul-de-sac, and I'd turned into our road and positioned myself diagonally across the road, ready to reverse onto the drive, when the car suddenly stopped dead. There was absolutely no power, so I couldn't even get the hazard lights on, and we couldn't try to push the car onto the drive or to the side of the road because it's an automatic and it was stuck in park. So Trin stayed by the car to explain to any drivers who were trying to get in or out of our road what had happened, as there was no room to get around us, and I went in to phone a local garage for help. They came straight away and helped me to get on the drive, but suggested that I got my breakdown company to come out and replace the battery. So eventually, a few hours later, the RAC did turn up, but they couldn't make the car work either. They tried various things to no avail, but the test they did on the battery didn't seem to indicate a problem. What the RAC man did notice was some chewed insulation on some of the wiring under the bonnet that fed into the main body of the car. A problem he couldn't deal with anyway, and especially not in the dark. It was by now nearly 9 o'clock in the evening. So the next day I contacted the car dealership to arrange for them to receive it, and I arranged for the RAC to pick up the car and deliver it to the garage, and I contacted my insurance company to get them involved in case it turned out to be an expensive repair. Once I'd got over the shock of breaking down right in the middle of the road, I seemed to spend the next 24 hours on a bit of a high. I became aware of all the small miracles that I'd experienced, and so I was hugely thankful to God that the car didn't stop dead without any warning on the dual carriageway, or on the busy country road between Cricklade and Highworth. I was thankful to God that the man from the local garage came within a couple of minutes to help me, even though he should have been going home at that point. I was particularly thankful that the jump start that he gave me enabled me to get on the drive, especially when later on the RAC man said he couldn't understand why that had worked, if it was a mouse chewing through the wires incident. And he even told me actually that he thought a miracle must have happened. When I spoke to a friend the next day and commented that it was a shame that the miracle didn't actually get me right onto the drive instead of onto the road just outside the drive, and she pointed out that if that had happened, then I probably wouldn't have realised that I had a problem at all. And then I would have been in difficulties at 6:45 the next morning when I needed to get Trin to the bus stop again. The only thing that slightly got in the way of my euphoria of gratitude was the mouse. I really do like mice. I love it when I see them when I'm out for a walk, or in our previous house when they used to run around just outside the patio doors. Everywhere we've lived, we've had a mouse living in the garage at some point for some period of time, and I try to leave them alone. I think they're just looking for somewhere sheltered and warm, as we all would be if we didn't have a place to call home. But clearly the mouse in the car had caused some damage that was at best inconvenient and at worst potentially dangerous. So I'm conflicted because I want to live in harmony with nature and I don't want to get in the way of the mice, but at the same time I need them to try and stay away from the cars and any other wiring that they might take a fancy to. I spent a few days praying that either the insurance company would cover the cost of the repairs or that I would be able to afford to pay for them. The RAC man wasn't very reassuring in this regard. He said, oh, well, it might cost hundreds of pounds, but it could cost thousands. So I was praying and trying to trust that just as I'd seen God working through the car events up to this point, that God would continue to bring things together so that I could manage the situation. Then on Thursday came the phone call from the insurance company to tell me that they'd spoken to the garage and they'd found a battery fault and had replaced the battery free of charge under warranty. Any relief at that was tempered by worry that the garage had missed something. I'd definitely seen evidence of chewing after all. And when I spoke to the garage myself, I wasn't overly reassured. So I spent the next 24 hours until I could get across to the garage to collect the car, worrying that there was still another problem lurking that hadn't been spotted. This all came as a real shock to me. After all, I'd been praying for an affordable solution, and the answer was that I didn't have to pay a single penny. But I couldn't quite cope with that answer. It wasn't the answer I thought I was looking for. So I spent another sleepless night praying about it and trying to hand my worries over to God, but it was really hard to let it all go. It's made me think about how I respond to answers to prayer that don't seem to fit with what I want. I think I often try to micromanage God, and although I try really hard nowadays not to be too specific in my praying but to leave room for God to work, I'm aware that I still usually have some kind of idea in my mind about what the solution will be and about what God will do. In a broader sense, I'm asking myself a lot of questions this week, and I really don't have a lot of answers. When I'm praying for a particular outcome, am I really listening to God? If I don't get the outcome I've been praying for, do I accept that God has answered my prayer differently? Or do I look to blame people or circumstances for thwarting God's will? And how do I cope with knowing that while I may be praying for or hoping for or expecting one thing, other people might be praying for and hoping for and expecting the opposite? I don't like the idea of winners and losers in prayer, so perhaps we're all going about it the wrong way. It sometimes feels a bit like the situation where people at a football match are praying for their team to win, or countries involved in war and conflict are praying for their own side's success. There will inevitably be people on both sides praying the same prayer, and in a football match only one team can win, unless they draw, and that's probably not what their supporters are hoping for. And war is different because I don't think anyone ever wins in those circumstances. Church meetings at all levels can encourage us into this way of praying. Lord, I really want this decision to be made, or I really want this to be the outcome, so please make it happen. But often there will be others involved who want the opposite to be the case and who will be praying the same prayer as me about what they want. So although I generally do know what my own hopes are, I try now to pray a bit more broadly for two things: for God's will to be done and made evident in the outcome, and that if this is not the result that I'd hoped for, that I would have enough love and grace in my heart to concede and admit that I was wrong. This is often really hard though. I wonder if sometimes God has been trying to show me gently that I've been stuck on a particular idea, but I'm just not listening. So it takes the big shock to the system and the big decision that doesn't go my way to make me take notice to what God has been trying to tell me all along. And that's still dependent on me being willing to listen and learn and accept, and to stop trying to micromanage God and everyone else around me. To go back to the saga of the car, in the midst of my praying and worrying about the fact that I was getting a free new battery rather than what I expected, expensive rewiring, God put a person in my mind. Jim knows a lot about cars and enjoys being involved with them, and I also thought he might be available to come with me to the garage, so I got in touch with him. He picked me up and took me to collect the car. He asked all the relevant questions about what the garage had done when we got there. He looked at the test results on various things, and he looked under the bonnet before he would let me take the car away. When he was satisfied that everything was okay, we left the garage, and he followed me all the way to where I was going, even though that was far out of his way, just to make sure that everything looked okay on the road and that I was happy. He was the calm and reassuring presence that I needed, and I was finally able to let go of my worry and accept that God had indeed blessed me more abundantly than I was expecting. Sometimes it's hard to accept an answer to prayer that isn't the right answer, isn't the one we were looking for. Sometimes it's hard to accept the love and generosity of God that exceeds our expectations. Sometimes we just try too hard to be in control of everything, micromanaging our lives, our hopes, and the things we expect to happen, and the things we want to achieve. And sometimes we try to micromanage God and everyone else around us too. The thing I believe God has been showing me this week is to learn to let go of the things that I don't have any control over anyway. And rather than worrying through sleepless nights, to trust that whatever the outcome, God is with me. Sometimes that's the outcome I want. And sometimes I have to learn to live with things that I didn't want or expect. But either way, God is there asking for my love and my trust in all the situations I face. For a control freak like me, this isn't easy. So I've got a new prayer. that day by day God will help me a little bit more to release those things I want to hang on to, and that day by day I will learn to trust a bit more, not just in theory, not just in my words or in my head, but in the way I actually live my life. May God give me the love and grace today to live well with whatever comes my way. That's all I want.